At Wheels Through Time, there are hundreds of motorcycles and dozens of cars, each with a story all of their own. From the rarest antiques to the most iconic styles, we are dedicated to telling the story of these old bikes.
Well, Wheels Through Time is a running and rolling history lesson, and our history lesson today is going to pick up in 1929, going to go to 1931. Of course, we're talking about Harley 45s. This is actually the first part of a series. We're going to be running through all the different models of Harley 45s, but today we're starting in 1929. I was looking at my file on this bike, 1931, just a little while ago, and I discovered I've owned this bike for 26 years. It's a 1931 Harley-Davidson model DLD. It has a great long history. It was restored by my old pal, Chuck Lipsky, back in the 80s, and I was the lucky guy to end up owning this machine. The DLD model, quite the sport model it was. But let me back up just for a moment. 1929, Indian had just come out with their 101 Scout. And the 101 Scout was really the real premiere of the Indian 750 Superbike. Prior to the 101 Scout, Indian had produced a 500 and a 750 Scout, but the 101 was a new breed, and Harley had to meet them on the battleground, and a 750 it was. So what Harley did early on is they took their single-cylinder, not highly successful motorcycle. They were made in 350s and 500 engine sizes, and they took that chassis and they developed an engine that would fit in that chassis. Of course, there was some weak points. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Harley-Davidson picked a very unusual time to really chase the Indian 101, and that was the height of the Depression, 1929, 1930-31. Actually, the 45 ran all the way to 52. But the first 3 years in the Harley's foray into the 750 engine, quite interesting with the Model D. It had a lot of shortcomings, but it was actually a very good bike. In 1929, they jumped in and built over 6,000 of these motorcycles, and in 1930, they followed with about 5,500. By 1931, they realized they were going to have to upgrade the Model DL and limited the production to, I think, about 2,500. My recollection tells me only about 250 of the sport model DLD was ever produced. And it's interesting to note that this bike at, I think, $310 or $315, it was just $15 less than the big brother, the Harley-Davidson VL with the 74 cubic inch motor. So people that wanted the DLD wanted the lightweight sport bike, just like the Indian guys, and Harley-Davidson gave them exactly what they wanted, the model DLD in the sport model. There's a lot of reasons Harley riders chose the DL model for their joy of riding. Let me kind of show you what some of those pleasures are from really a rider's perspective. You have the spark advance on the left, you have your brake lever, you have your brake adjuster underneath, you got your horn, got your ignition switch, you got your low and high beam, don't forget the dash light switch. Down here you've got your steering dampener. On the speedometer, you have a reset and another reset on this side. Look at those little numbers turn. Over here on the left, you've got your 3-speed shifter. Don't forget the oil pump, because when you're running hard, you got to pump that thing while you're riding. The front cap, as you can see, says oil. The other two caps are gasoline. On the right handlebar, you have the low-high beam, and you have your throttle control. That's a lot going on, because while you're doing all that, you've got to watch the road, but you've got to watch your amp meter to make sure your generator's working, and don't forget that speedometer. And that's what makes the DL so fun to ride. It's all right here and putting that rubber to the road. Of course, the DL will run about 80 miles an hour. At least this one will. It's a DLD Sport. I have another 31 DL. That's a long story, but when you're working all those controls, of course, you have to know what that's all about. You got your brake lever over here, front brake. On this side, you got your timing. That's hidden underneath the left cover. It actually moves the distributor, giving you advanced and retarded. The horn's located right up here, and of course, the ignition turns on the coil, and of course, never forget the headlights. There they are, low and high beam, it's on the right. Throttle is on the side, makes you go. Shifter's on the left, 3-speed, foot's on the clutch, You got your 3 caps and your speedometer reset. That's what made the DL such a joy to drive. But I must say the DL was not without flaws. From 29 to 31, Harley-Davidson did build 15,000 of these machines in just over 1,000 days. But from the very start to the very finish, Harley-Davidson knew the Model D would have to be upgraded someday. So during that 3 years was a continuous flow of running changes, from the headlight to the transmission to the clutch, improvements to the generator drive, improvements to carburation, improvements to braking systems. All of those things were running changes from 29 to 31. 32, right around the corner, kind of a whole new engine, the Model R, and we're going to talk about that one next. One of the things I wanted to talk about on the Model DL was fit, finish, and color. Also wanted to mention some of the resources available to find bits and pieces and parts if you find a Model DL. Fit and finish, Harley-Davidson did a great job. They took their really well-trained staff of people that were dedicated to building fine quality Harley-Davidsons, and in the process built 15,000 Model DLs. They have the beautiful dash. They have all the great controls. They sourced the best parts they could find. Of course, that was in a changing world. But color-wise, you'll notice this bike, vermilion red, in 1931. Interestingly, 1932 was the last year Harley-Davidson offered or mandated olive drab, or what looks like military paint, was a standard color. Somewhere around 1930, they started offering special colors and special offerings. This bike, of course, vermilion red and black with gold striping, is truly a standout as opposed to the green machine. And it was really what brought Harley out of the Depression, adding color to their machines. Now, speaking of color, you can buy paint for this bike. My friend John Pierce has a company that manufactures all the correct colors paint. As far as nuts and bolts and bits and pieces, the Colony Company, plenty of parts available. As far as hard to find parts, good luck. Your best bet, find one like I did, complete and running. So what I'm gonna do right now is the starting procedure. I got the gas turned on. I got the choke turned on. And a Harley 45 does not take a tremendously vigorous kick. A 45 is really kind of more like push it through. So push it through once on choke, push it through twice on choke, take the choke to half, turn the ignition on, retard the spark. And that's how a Model DLD is supposed to run. Notice the snap in that engine. It's got high compression, and so do I. Woo!